Hi, I'm Mike Whitney of the Bible Dialogues. This message is about Jesus in Genesis 3:15, which is known as the Proto-Evangelium. We see a fulfillment of Genesis 3:15, which says to Satan, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Of course, the starting point is the virgin birth of Jesus, as suggested by the seed being only of woman. Also, the designation as seed appears in the New Testament as found, for example, in Galatians 3:16, which speaks of the promise to Abraham as also being promised to Jesus as his seed. We should also recognize that Satan is not apparently a creature that can physically father any offspring, notwithstanding the image shown on the Passion of the Christ. Maybe it's not supposed to be the seed of Satan, but that was the impression when I saw it. But definitely that is not the idea of the seed of Satan within Scripture, nor is the idea left to speculation. The main aspects of Genesis 3:15 appear in two categories. The first relates to the seed of woman, who the seed is born of a virgin and comes into conflict with Satan. Satan is defeated or bruised in his political influence or control. The second category is about Satan. He has some sort of seed that follow his nature. There is some sort of political government role of Satan. Satan operates also in conflict with the seed of the woman. Satan then attacks the heel of the seed of the woman, or just opposite is the seed of the woman crushes, in the act of crushing Satan, gets bruised on the heel. The arrival of the woman's seed triggers the fulfillment of Genesis 3:15. The Gospels start with Jesus being born of a virgin, as we see in the prototype within Isaiah 7:14. The birth appears as the initial point of the Gospel, but the Gospel quickly focuses on the preaching of John the Baptist, who confronts the Sadducees and Pharisees in Matthew 3:7. But when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to his baptism, he said to them, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" The wording in English appears in a fashion that seems distinct from Genesis 3:15, but has the same idea. That makes the association difficult to recognize, though. If appearing in isolation, we might even fail to see Genesis 3:15 here. Later verses in Matthew confirm a conflict with Pharisees with a repeat of Jesus calling the Pharisees a brood of vipers, as in Matthew 12:34 and 23:33. Matthew uses this designation only of the leaders. Likewise, John speaks of the leaders as having their devil as the father. John 8:44. The conflict appears clear at this point, but still might be considered by some people to be uncertain. A political aspect contributes to the scenario in the protection of their nation, per John 11:47 through 50. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish." The leaders were focused on pleasing the Roman Empire rulers and maintaining their interdependent relationship. There then is the tying of fate between Judea and the empire, which supports the idea of a political or governmental sense behind Genesis 3:15. An extra idea to consider here is that the nation actually perished. Jerusalem was left vacant. Essentially, the only survivors of Judea were the remnant of Isaiah 10:20-22, who escaped the city before it was encircled, as found in Matthew 24. The Jewish leaders had Jesus tried and hung on the cross. This matches with the bruising of the heel of the seed, who is Christ, who only is bruised since Jesus was raised from the dead and became victorious, and thus was only hurt on his heel. However, this is not yet a victory involving the bruising of Satan's head. The Jewish leaders remain in power at that time. When Jesus notes Satan falling in Luke 10:17-18, this may just be tying the 72 disciples' actions with present tense vividness of the crushing of Satan's political and religious influence, as would come later. When Jesus speaks of heaven, he appears to speak of Satan's political power, as the analogy in Isaiah 14:12, since Satan is not destroyed. In Romans 16:20, Paul mentions Satan soon being crushed, thus highlighting a probable political aspect and maybe a religious element of Genesis 3:15, and adding a timeline to the fulfillment of Genesis 3:15. The ideas of Satan and his seed again come together clearly in the explanation of the wheat and tares parable in Matthew 13:38-39, where the devil and the sons again point to the pattern of Genesis 3:15 of Satan and his seed. Since these terms repeatedly refer to Satan and the Pharisees, the passages speak consistently of the conflict between Jesus and the Pharisees that extends both in the religious and political realms, including Judea and the Roman Empire, where the idea of religion can apply to the empire's use of pagan worship to keep the people focused on that worship instead of on the empire troubles. The Pharisees also manipulated religion without regard to the true God. No other era can bring these elements together again, while also satisfying the point of Romans 16:20, which again speaks of the crushing of Satan's head. It is curious why God places focus on the interaction of the Messiah with the Jewish leaders of the first century. God maybe sought to emphasize the need of that generation to follow Christ. What we have seen in Genesis 3:15 is its connection with the incarnation of Jesus. This verse marks the beginning of the Messianic era. Jesus' arrival explained, but only temporarily restraint of Satan is expressed. The major point we see is the fulfillment of Genesis 3:15, which shows God's hand working through history. That concludes this episode on the brood of vipers. Please share, subscribe, pray for my channel as well, and have a good day. Bye.